All right, Shalom. First off of all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rukar Kadash. Dub honors to the apostles and elders of GMS. Salutes and honors to the elect, all the brothers across the four corners who are enduring in truth and sincerity, the women, the children, and the confusion of faith who follow. So yesterday I did the Second Esdras chapter 11 review, basically going over the 12 feathers, which are the 12 Caesars. Okay, so today we're going to go into chapter 12, because as I mentioned in yesterday's video, chapter 11 and chapter 12 go hand in hand. So, with that being said, let's get into it. Really, the first 8 verses is, just Ezra's reflecting on everything that he saw in the 11th chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to verse 9. It says, "For thou hast judged me worthy to show me the last times. And he said unto me, this is the interpretation of the vision." So, like I said, chapter 11 and chapter 12 go hand in hand. This is him getting the interpretation of the vision that he saw in chapter 11. All right, so this is verse 11. It says, "The eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel." Right, speaking of Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7, which is, after this I saw in the night's vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and devoured it. Great iron teeth, and devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with their feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Speaking of the Roman Empire, all right, so a lot of the vision that Daniel received, Ezra also received. It was a lot more, in certain places over here, in certain places over there. All right, Daniel, he received, visions of, all the kingdoms, and Ezra is getting this vision of, the Roman times. All right, it will be the iron on the body, in one of Daniel's earlier visions, and it's the fourth beast in Daniel's 7th vision. All right, verse 12, it says, "But it was not expounded on unto him, therefore now I declare it unto thee." So Daniel didn't get the breakdown like Ezra's got. Ezra's seen the vision, and now, like I said, the next chapter, he's getting the breakdown of what he actually saw. All right, it says, "Behold, the day will come that there will rise up a kingdom upon earth, and it shall be feared above all the kingdoms that were before it. And in the same shall 12 kings reign, one after another." Right, so going back to what I said, how the Roman Empire was the iron legs. All right, it had iron weapons, and it was vast. It controlled the whole known world at that time, and nobody could really contend with the Roman Empire. And it mentioned that verse 14, "In the same shall 12 kings reign, one after another," going back to the 12 feathers, the 12 Caesars. So let's go back through them. First one, which scholars, they try to say that Julius Caesar isn't one of the kings, but it all started with Caesar, or with Julius. Then we have Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba, Ortho, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. Verse 15, it says, "Whereof the second shall begin to reign, and shall have more time than any of the 12. Speaking of Augustus, all right. So let's go back into the 11th chapter, second Esdras chapter 11 and 13. It says, and so it was that when it rained, the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more, so that the next following stood up and reigned and had a great time. Speaking of, like I said, Augustus, because Augustus he said that he had a great time in chapter 11, and then in 12 it said he should have more time than any of the 12. All right, because he reigned from 27 BC to 14 AD, 41 years. You know, way more than any of the other ones. You had some of the kings, some of the Caesars reigned, maybe 10, 20 years at the most. All right, some of them 5. When you go into the year of the 4 kings, one was like 7 months, one was like 3 months. They really had very small times to rule, depending on, depending on really loyalty. Some of them were getting knocked off by competitors, siblings. It was very crazy, how the fate to a lot of these Caesars, should I say. So let's go to verse 16. It says, and this do the 12 wings signify, which thou sawest. As for the voice which thou heardest speak, and that thou sawest not go out from the body thereof, this is the interpretation, that at the time of the kingdom there shall arise great strivings, and shall stand in peril of falling. Nevertheless, it shall not fall. Then shall it be restored again to its beginning. All right, now that's speaking about starting off with the civil war that happened in the time of Nero. All right, so Nero. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. All right, so speaking of the year of the 4 emperors, the year of the 4 emperors was basically kicked in because of Nero. Nero was not very liked. All right, Nero burned down Rome for his own selfish reasons. And you had a lot of people who were revolting against Nero. So I'll read an excerpt from Wikipedia.com. Slack it. In the year of the 4 emperors. All right, it says in 68, Vindix, legate of Gallia Lugdunensis, revolted against Nero and encouraged Galba, governor of Hispania, to claim the empire. The later was acclaimed emperor by his legion in early April. He was notably supported by Otho, legate of Lusitania. Soon after, the legate of the Legion of Africa, Clodius Macer, also rebelled against Nero. Vindex was defeated by Rhine legions at the Battle of Vesontio, but they too rebelled against Nero. Finally, on the 9th of June 68, Nero committed suicide after having been declared public enemy by the Senate. So you had the Senate declare him a public enemy. He's like, hey, look, we can't control all of this. And my fault, I wanted to make a point going back to Augustus, because during the time of Augustus, he was acclaimed. All right, Augustus was Julius Caesar's great nephew. Okay, his given name was Octavian. If you watch the series on HBO, you'll see him as a kid. His name's Octavian. But I'll read this from the Wikipedia excerpt. It says Caesar Augustus. Um, the reign of Augustus initiated an era of relative peace known as the Pax Romana. The Roman war was largely free from large-scale conflict for more than 2 centuries, despite continuous wars of imperial expansion. So there was no war pretty much in Rome. There was expansion. All right, so there was like fighting on the outskirts to get more room and area and land for Rome. But as far as inside within the Roman uh, territory, there was very little fighting. Okay, it says for more than 2 centuries, despite continuous wars of imperial expansion on the empire's frontiers and the year-long civil war known as the Year of the Four Emperors over imperial succession. So, jumping back forward to the time of Nero, okay, and going into the Year of the Four Emperors, that's really the only time where you would see this kind of chaos in Rome. So when it says in verse 17, verse 18, after that time, the kingdom there shall rise great strivings and shall stand in peril of falling. That's what it's speaking of. Because, and we'll go into the four emperors here in a moment. It says, it shall stand in peril of falling. Nevertheless, it shall not fall. Then it shall be restored again to its beginning. Okay, and that being restored to its beginning is speaking of Vespasian, who through the Spirit is Julius Caesar coming back in his glory. Okay, and the restoration of the first triumvirate. All right, so let's go into this the year of the four emperors. So, as I was saying, you had Nero. He was on the seat. They chased him out. He committed suicide. Then, let me see. Continuing after he was declared a public enemy of the Senate, it said, which made Galba the new emperor. However, Galba was unable to establish his authority over the empire, as several of his supporters were disappointed by his lack of gratitude. He especially adopted Piso Licinius as heir. Galba was childless and elderly, instead of Ortho, who it had been widely assumed would be chosen. Angered by this disgrace, Ortho murdered Galba on January 15th with the help of the Praetorian Guard. So, like I said before, some of these Caesars wouldn't last long, depending on the relationships at the time. So he got killed by the guy who he kind of messed him over. All right, everyone thought that this guy Ortho was going to be his successor because he was old and he didn't have no kids, but he picked somebody else, and instead Ortho said, "Well, I'll just take it." Ortho murdered Galba we got that by the Praetorian Guard, and became emperor instead. Unlike Galba, he rapidly earned considerable popularity, notably by bestowing favors and emulating Nero's successful early years. Ortho still had to face another claimant, Vitellius, who is the next one to come in line, the next one to come in power. I believe Galba reigned 7 months, Ortho 3 months. So, and remember, this all happened in a period of 1 year. Imagine if, we had 4 presidents in 1 year. You had Joe Biden, then he died, and then Kamala Harris comes along, and, she get knocked off. Or then, whoever is the Speaker of the House right now, I couldn't tell you off memory, but, they come into the seat, and then they get sick and they die, and then the next person comes in. It would be wild. It's almost hard to fathom, because they back in those times, they had the same system as we do right now, because Rome is, or America is Rome reincarnated. All right, so they they are the basis of our um, quote democracy and the republic. All right, continuing on. So now Vitalis is coming into the picture. So Ortho still had to face another claimant, uh, Slakia, Vitalis, who had been acclaimed by the legions on the Rhine on January 1st of 69. Vitalis won the first battle of Bedriacum on April 14th. Ortho committed suicide the next day, so he didn't even have to kill him. He just took himself out. And Vitalis was appointed emperor by the Senate on April 19th. So in June of 68, you had Nero kill himself, and Galba came in power. Galba basically finished out that year, and in January, Ortho killed him. All right, and then by April 14th, Ortho's dead, and Vitalis is reigning. Okay, it's crazy. That's crazy. So the new emperor had little support outside his veterans from the German legions, though Vespasian, the legate of Syria, made his bid known. He received the allegiance of the legions of the Danube, as well as many former supporters of Galba and Ortho. After his acclamation of Alexandria on July 1st, Vespasian sent his friend Mucinus with part of his army to fight Vitalis. But the Danubian legions commanded by Antonius Primus had not waited for Mucinus and defeated Vitalis's legions at the second battle of Bedriacum on October 24th. Vitalis was subsequently killed by a mob on December 20th. Mucinus arrived several days after and swiftly secured Vespasian's position in Rome. Primus had acted independently from him. So, in that whole year, there you go. In that whole year, you had 4 rulers. All right, so that was verse 18. It says, I'll read. It says, after that time, the kingdom, there shall rise great strivings, and it shall stand in peril of falling. Nevertheless, it shall not fall, but it shall be restored again to its beginning. Right, so we have, now we have Vespasian, the founder of the Flavian dynasty, okay, who is, like I said, Julius Caesar coming back in that stead, okay, that first triumvirate, which when you go into the triumvirate, it's Julius Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey, okay. I'm not gonna go too much into all 3 of them. I went into them in the last video. Definitely check it out. Very edifying, very edifying. A lot of information about these 3. But I am gonna go into the Flavian dynasty. That word Flavian, when you go to the etymology, then you'll click on Flavius. It means golden yellow or blonde, yellow haired. Basically, they are yellow haired. All right, they're Edomites. Get this precept. This is Leviticus 13:30. It says, "Then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in slight deeper than the skin, and there be yellow and it be in Sakia. Then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in slight deeper than the skin, and there be in it a yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry skull, even a leprosy upon the head or the beard. So that's leprosy. They're lepers, right? They're Edomites. That blonde hair, blue eye is a genetic defect. Okay, so it's just proving, who these people really are, and who we're dealing with. We know exactly who we're dealing with. All right. Verse 19. And whereas thou sawest the 8 small under feathers sticking to her wings, this is the interpretation, that in the him there shall arise 8 kings, whose time shall be small and their years swift. Right. So going into all the different kings, Nero and Crassus, the four in the 1 year, and the Flavian dynasty, their times are a lot shorter. All right, when you go into it, I think out of all of them, Vespasian had like 10 years. Titus had 2 years. Domitian had a little bit of time. Domitian had from 81 to 96. I'll just go through all the time since I'm over here. Augustus had the longest time to reign. Augustus was from 27 BC to 14 AD. Tiberius was from 14 AD to 37 AD. Caligula from 37 to 41. Claudius from 41 to 51. Nero from 54. How am I missing time there? Nero from 50. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I know I wrote the times right. Yeah, that's my fault. Typo. So Claudius was 41 to 54, and Nero was 54 to 68. Galba, Ortho, Vitalis, and then Vespasian was 68 to 69. Vespasian 69 to 79. Titus 79 to 81. Domitian 81 to 96. So as you can see, some had short times, some had longer times to rule. It was very vast. Okay. Verse 20, it says, in him there shall rise 8 kings, whose time shall be small and their years swift. All right, 2 of them shall perish in the middle time approaching. 4 shall be kept until the end to approach, but 2 shall be kept until the end. Okay, and that's speaking of that timeline of the 4 kings, the 4 emperors in that year. And then it said, but 2 shall be kept to the end, speaking of Titus and Domitian. Because remember, after the year of the 4 emperors, you had Vespasian, who came into power, the head of the Flavian dynasty, whose sons ruled after him. And we're going into that time. That's the time of 70 AD, when the Lord's prophecy came to pass. In Matthew 24, let's just grab that real quick. Matthew 24, and I'll start at 14. It says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. Then shall the end come. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is in the housetop not come down and take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. So that's speaking of 70 AD when the Vespasian, well, it was actually Titus who did the majority of the handiwork, so to speak, under the rule of Vespasian. Vespasian was basically the one who was in power, giving the orders, and that's when Titus executed it. Um, that's why we have not we, but that's why you'll see the Ark of Titus and them celebrating sacking the temple. Okay. And Domitian reigned after Titus. And, well, I don't want to jump the gun. I almost jumped the gun there. Verse 22, it says, "And whereas thou sawest 3 heads resting, this is the interpretation. In his last days shall the Most High raise up 3 kingdoms, and renew many things therein, and they shall have dominion on the earth." And that's speaking about the Flavian dynasty. And when it says 3 kingdoms, it's not talking about like 3 separate kingdoms in one. It's, it was Vespasian's kingdom, then Rome fell into the hands of Titus, and then it was Domitian's turn to rule. So it's 3 separate kingdoms, all one kingdom, all 3 different time periods. And this is actually a callback or a precept for Romans chapter 11 and verse 9. Yeah, it said, "But let the heads be preserved for the last." And that's speaking again of the triumvirate of Julius Caesar coming back via Vespasian. All right, verse 24. "And of those that dwell therein with much oppression above all those that were before them, therefore are they called the heads of the eagle. For these are they that shall accomplish his wickedness, and shall finish his last end." Right. Speaking of, like I said, 70 AD, where you had our people, having to flee by the million into the interiors of Africa. You had millions who ended up being slaves. Some of them had to fight in the Roman Colosseum. Some of them fled into the interiors of Europe. We were really scattered at that time because of these 3 men. All right. The Flavian dynasty really came in and literally was the reason for the diaspora. Through the spirit of, Yahweh Bashim Yashai, that was our end in our holy lands, so to speak. Verse 26, "And whereas thou sawest that the great head appeared no more, it signified that one of them shall die from his bed, yet with pain." And that's speaking about Vespasian. Vespasian was that main head, and Vespasian did die with much pain. I believe they said that he died of diarrhea. So, you can look that up. It was a very painful death. Is a terrible way to go. But verse 27, it says, "For the 2 that remain shall be slain with the sword, for the sword of one shall devour the other, but the last shall fall through the sword himself." All right, and it was very much controversy when Titus died, because they believed that Titus was actually killed by his brother Domitian. Let's see if we can get something on the death of Titus. As Emperor Titus, best known for completing the Colosseum and for his generosity in relieving the suffering of 2 disasters, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD and a fire in Rome in 80. After barely 2 years in office, Titus died of a fever on September 13th of 81. Slakia. So he only had 2 years, and with that, it said that he died of a fever. It very well could have been, poison. There's a lot of rumors surrounding Domitian, being jealous and wanting to, basically had a power seat. You know, um, Vespasian had Titus do the majority of his work, and you know how it is when people get jealous or that sibling rivalry. Well, if you had a sibling rivalry and you were in the the Roman um, rulership, you might have got knocked off. Let me see. Is there anything missed? Let's go. Let's get a precept. Second Esdras chapter 11 and verse. Excuse me. Verse 35. It says, "And I beheld, and lo, the head upon the right side devoured it, and devoured it that was upon the left side." And that's speaking of Titus and Domitian. One of them devoured the other. Right? Domitian devoured Titus. Coming back to verse 28 in chapter 12, it says, "For the sword of the one shall devour the other, but at the last he shall fall through the sword himself." And we're at, well, since we got everybody else, let's get how Domitian died. On on September excuse me, on September 18th of 96, Domitian was assassinated in a palace conspiracy involving members of the Praetorian Guard and several of his freed men. On the same day, Nerva was declared emperor by the Roman Senate. So the same guys who took out, I believe, the same guys who took out Ortho took out Domitian, the Praetorian Guard. So let's get a little on them. Get a little history in. The Praetorian Guard was a unit of the Imperial Roman Army that served as personal bodyguards and intelligence agents for the Roman emperors. So basically, it's like the Secret Service. Yeah, that's like their version of the Secret Service, the Praetorian Guard. All right, learn a little something every day. Verse 29. "And whereas thou sawest two feathers under the wings passing over the head that were on the right side, it signified that these are they whom the highest had kept under their end, and this is the small kingdom, and full of trouble, as thou sawest." That's just basically a callback to verse 21 when it spoke of the 4 and the 2 breaking down. Verse 31, "And the lion whom thou sawest rising up out of the wood and roaring and speaking to the eagle and rebuking her for her unrighteousness and all the words which thou hast heard, this is the anointed." All right, this is Yahweh Shai. "This is the anointed which the highest have kept for them for their wickedness unto the end. He shall reprove them and shall upbraid them with their cruelty, for he shall set them before him alive in judgment, and shall rebuke them and correct them." Right, man. So that's Yahweh Shai coming back and putting this place in order. What's this say? This is Isaiah 47:3 says, thy nakedness should be uncovered, thy shame should be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man. Right, you're gonna have to deal with Yahweh Shai. All right, and then I believe there's another one. Isaiah 63:1, it says, who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength, that I speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Therefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thine garments like him that treadeth the wine fat. All right, that's speaking of Yahweh Shai, and his garments dyed in a reddish color, speaking of looking like he treaded the wine fat, because when Yahweh Shai comes back, he's gonna take down these nations. All right, and it's gonna appear that he was treading the wine fat because of the blood that is gonna be shed. All right, it says, I have trodden the wine press alone, and of the people none was with me, for I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. Okay, so this is speaking of Yahweh Shai. Verse 33, it says, for he shall set them before him alive in judgment, and shall rebuke them and correct them. And for the rest of my people shall he deliver with mercy, those that have been preserved upon my borders, and he shall make them joyful until the coming of the day of judgment, whereof I have spoken unto thee from the beginning. Right, so that's Yahweh Shai also, saving the hopeful elect. All right, and us being able to get out of this place and establish a kingdom wherein righteousness dwells. Verse 35, this is the dream that thou sawest, and these are the interpretation. Thou hast been meet to know this secret of the highest. Therefore, write all these things that thou hast seen in a book, and hide them, and teach them to the wise of the people, whose hearts thou knowest, whose hearts thou knowest, whose hearts thou knowest, may comprehend and keep these secrets. All right, and that's pretty much the end of it, but it's basically saying this isn't for everyone. Only teach the ones who can know and can comprehend these secrets. All right, it's for the hopeful elect. It was in those times, it is in these times. That's pretty much it. So with that being said, Lord's will, you were edified, and you don't want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Rekar Kadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of GMS. Salutes and honors to the elect. All the brothers across the four corners who are enduring in truth and sincerity, the women, the children, and confusion of faith who follow. Shalom.